Right, hello, welcome everybody to our JuNewary challenge. You like what I did there? Um, I've got my sunglasses at the ready just to prove it is the June one. Um, so I did have them on as well all through the recording. Today's actually probably the nicest afternoon of the whole recording period, but there we are. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you all and also to welcome Karen Marshalsay, our JuNewary challenge composer. If you'd like to unmute, Karen, it'd be lovely for you to say a quick hello. And Karen is from Scotland, and maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit, Karen, about what you do.
Yeah, I'm in Edinburgh here. Thank you all so much for playing along and learning this piece. What do I do? I'm a harper. I play all sorts of different harps. This is my new baby that I got at the Harp Festival in Edinburgh. So we're still very new, and that was one of the incentives. When I was writing this piece, I just got to sit and play this new harp and get to know it. So the piece was also a me getting to know my new harp. But I also play wire strung harp and bray harp, and I do play pedal harp as well. I don't have one, but I play one in a hotel in town. I do a lot of composition. I'm a traditional player, and I've come through sort of the traditional world. So composition, in a sense, is quite natural because you get to a point where you should be doing your own arrangements, rather than learning pieces out of other people's. Uh, and then you start writing tunes. If you think of yourself as a traditional musician, you start writing tunes. And then eventually, probably about 1999, 98, 99, I think it was, I started putting it into more of a bigger sound world, if you like, and moving more into the composition side. And a lot of that was for other instruments, to be entirely honest, like piano and trumpet and string orchestras and string quartets and things like that. But in about 8 years ago, I did the composer in residence with yourselves, and that was great. That's actually the first time I'd kind of really done a lot of composition for harp ensembles. So obviously you'd done little bits and pieces before, duos and different things, but yeah, that's me. Still here, still playing, still writing tunes.
That's fantastic. So yes, we really enjoyed. I mean, this was when I first met you as well, was when
Mm,
Harps Northwest we decided that we were really wanting to have a composer in residence to work with us over quite a period of time, wasn't it? It was quite a few months.
yeah.
And we advertised and we interviewed, and Karen just shone, both in, both in your style and your approachability, and in the way that you were willing to really work with our membership,
Mm,
to really create something that was special, and that kind of touched upon the feel of the land, because you ended
mm.
up calling it the lay of the land, and but also of the individuals as well. And Karen ran various workshops over the course of about 9 months, I think it was.
Pretty much,
um,
yeah.
yeah, and you introduced us to fantastic techniques that were steeped in Scottish tradition, but that we weren't that familiar with, which was really fantastic. Um, and and then there, out of that came this lovely suite that we now have, and the We Are Harps Northwest piece from that is featuring heavily this year as it's our 20th
Mm,
anniversary year. So that's being
lovely.
played at all of our special gatherings, which is really lovely. So we have been working on Karen's piece, The Lade, and it's from a brand new book, which Karen will tell us about later. But I've just got my copy today. It's very exciting. Um, and I'm going to, I've been doing special things. I'm going to remove the pin. I don't know if that pinned it for everybody. Hello. So can we get a sort of first of all, a general smiley face, thumbs up kind of reaction as to how everyone's been finding it? First of all, how lovely is it? So I think, it's proper, really, really lovely. Yeah. And how's everybody been finding it? Are we all sort of raring to go? Yeah. I thought what we would do today, we'll do what we often do in these sessions, which is to make sure we do a nice steady play along that everyone can play along with, and then a faster one. And I think I'll let Karen do the faster one for sure. So we can actually play along to Karen. Not fast, just faster.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I don't play it as fast as your fast one in the videos,
no, I
interestingly.
think that's
So we could,
probably
Yeah.
wise. So yeah. Um, but this is also going to be an opportunity to ask questions. And if you know, I say this every time, but if you're thinking it, so is someone else. So there's no daft questions. And I also thought what would be really good, because I'm aware of where the particularly interesting passage is in this piece. So I thought before we went into, right, let's have a go at playing it all together, we might just take a look at lines 5 and 6 together, and just sort of have a not a deep dive too much, but just right, let's just have a go at doing that nice and steady, really thinking about what the fingers are going to be, getting those thumb slides in. I'm really annoyed at myself. If you've used the fingered version that I gave, I'm really annoyed at myself for forgetting to write in the proper thumb slide mark from the 1 to the 1 at the beginning of that bar. But I'm hoping you all got it and spotted it. But yeah, there, and then on the line below, I forgot it too. So there you go. So yes, I thought we would start maybe with the upbeat to bar 17. So this last crotchet from the previous bar, and then we can go into bar 17, and we'll just do a steady run through of those 2 lines. Then we'll maybe give you a chance to ask any questions about those 2 lines, and then we'll do a full run through. That's what I'm feeling like we'll do. Okay, so we're starting with the upbeat to bar 17. Put some light on my part. Okay, and I'm going to take it really steady for this run through, because this is about warming us up, getting us used to playing along to me live. So it's going to be, I think we'll go with, we'll do that speed for the moment. Okay. Just to give ourselves thinking time. So my count will be the 1, 2, 3, and then we'll come in on beat 4. Okay, so ready? Just check. In fact, I might pin myself big a moment for you. Let's do that. Do clever things. Pin. There we go. Make myself a bit bigger. At least I don't know if that does it for you or if that just does it for me, but it, from the video point of view, it's going to make me look nice and big on screen. Okay, here's the count. 1 and 2 and 3 and. Okay, just going as far as there. Well done. Okay, so just specifically about that part, did anybody have any particular questions? Because these 2 lines were what, for me, informed the finger choices everywhere. Prior to that, I was thinking different fingering earlier on. And then I got to these lines, I was like, oh no, I'm going to need it to be a certain way. You may have noticed Karen spoke to me earlier and used the word finger geek. I went all finger geekery on you in this piece. So did anybody have any particular questions, specifically, like I say, about those 2 lines rather than more generic ones, or about finger choices? No? Oh, I must have done a good job. We'll take that. Let me just check the chat. There we are. Hello. Okay, so that's fine. That's great. If I've done a good job, that's brilliant. What I suggest then is, shall we do, is that speed okay for the minute? I know some of you can go faster, and we will do a faster one, but is that okay as our sort of gentle pace? Yeah? Okay, if that's okay for our gentle pace. So we'll do a playthrough of the whole thing now, because we're nicely warmed up with that bit. It's not going to be a shock when we get there. We're going to try and do those lovely dynamics, and we'll go all the way through. And then at the end of that, we'll open it up for the more general questions and chats. and we'll maybe ask Karen to tell us a bit more about the other pieces in the book, and then we'll finish with the fast to go through. Okay, so I will pin myself again. There we go. All right, here we go. So from the very beginning then, same sort of speed. Boom, 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 ba-dum. Going to really focus on those beautiful finger choices and the beautiful connecting up of everything, so that we really feel the phrases. Maybe have a quick practice, find your harmonic if you're playing harmonics at the end of line 1. Just spot where that is for you today. Okay. And we're going to let our shoulders stay relaxed through it all. Okay, here we go. Beginning. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 4. Slowing down a bit, and then we go back, and well done. Fantastic. How was that? Okay, yeah. Well done. Fantastic. Okay, so let's open it up to any questions about anything to do with the piece, or to do with learning the harp generally, or to do with me, or to do with Karen. David, I know you had a question, so maybe you could open up. Can you unmute for us, and then you can ask us?
Have I
And you did, and then you went back. There you are.
Right, okay. Yes. Um,
which is
Karen, I sort of quite interested to know, in a sense, how when you composed your piece, how conscious you were of the chords, the key. The reason I sort of say that is because I know that you're very interested in Gaelic and folk music, and I'm very interested in Gaelic and folk music too. And I have noticed that there's quite a lot of folk tunes that are that are modal, Mixolydian, Dorian, and it appeared to me that you began in Dorian mode for the first two, in a sense, the first two lines, and then went into Aeolian mode, which is fine. And it was beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And sort of my experience of modal music is that I feel that it adapts well for the harp. I think the harp brings out the best of modal music. So anyway, I've got sort of lots of sort of questions and sort of wondering, how, what your thoughts were as you were composing it.
Yeah, I mean, modes are incredibly important in traditional music. It's not just Gaelic music, it's kind of all Scottish traditional music. I mean, the bagpipes are actually in a Mixolydian mode, if you want to
Are
think
they?
about it
Right.
that way. Yeah, because it's a
I
flat and
didn't know that.
seventh. You
Yeah.
know, because the actual pipe scale, really the pipes have 9 notes, so they're going from A up to A. They have one low G, and you've got that really flattened seven sound, you know. I better change that back before I do anything else. And when you're saying Aeolian is literally just, we think of it as it's the natural minor
Yes,
scale.
that's the natural minor.
Harmonic and melodic minors mean absolutely nothing to me. I have to look them up every single time. They don't make sense. They don't make musical sense to my head or anything at all. But the natural minor, which is actually the Aeolian mode, it is there. Dorian is another one that's particularly important in Scottish music, and yes, you're right, it starts off in Dorian. When you're writing, I mean, you compose different things at different times. Sometimes you're just sitting faffing about on the harp and you end up writing tunes. And that's quite a lot of where a lot of my tunes start, to be entirely honest. Like, we were waiting in this group, I was playing for a sort of a tour group yesterday and they were running late. So I was just started the beginnings of another little tune because I was just sort of warming up and faffing about. And they're either keepers or they're not keepers, you know, you just kind of decide once you've kind of got it finished how far you want to take it. I also quite often on some sort of more background type gigs, you know, not a listening concert. I sit and improvise quite a lot on the harp. So
Yes.
this piece, for example, started off with an improvisation on my little wire strung harp during a gig because I had to kind of extend the piece I was playing on a train, to give you the story. I was playing on a train and I had to kind of time it that I finished as the train arrived in Waverley Station because there was a jazz quartet on the platform. So I had to keep going until I could hear the beginnings of the when the Saints come marching in, you know. And I was sitting on the wire harp and I was doing. And I was running my phone because I quite often, if I know I'm going to do a longish improvisation or I'm in the mood, I'll just run the record on my phone. And so there's all sorts of little snippets stuck in the phone that I've not really dug out and gone through yet. This particular thing was a brief, so it's actually really good to sort of compose to set parameters. So I decided that I didn't want lever changes and I wanted it in the key of C because I thought, or tuning of C. I talk about tunings if you like.
Yes.
So I wanted it to be in a C tuning with no lever changes or pedal changes because I felt that was the most widely accessible for people in the group. I don't know if you recognise that little improvisation, but it's what bar 17 starts.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Now, feel free to stick these back in. But I just wanted to change the nature of it. I was sitting playing it around on this harp, and I wanted the kind of the offbeat things. What I do with my left hand quite a lot when I'm playing is, in effect, ornamentation rather than harmony. And I always think of, when I'm playing, I always think of melody first and then ornamenting the melody, then supporting the melody, which is often just with octaves and fifths. And then if I want to put in any kind of extra harmony and things, kind of when I'm playing either my own music or traditional tunes. So the offbeat there, and the slight rise in sort of dynamics was a scaling down of, I wanted something in that bit. And I got that effect just by bringing in the left hand slightly on the offbeat. So that was kind of where it started. And then, to be entirely honest, there was a lot of composition is just work. It's just thinking things through. It's not all sitting there and being inspired. You need a little bit of inspiration, and you need some sort of story. I always need some sort of story. For me, it's often a sense of place. People and places is what my music is usually about, but sense of place is really important. But I wanted obviously something that was going to fit on 2 pages, so a sort of set number of bars. It could be done over sort of 10, 11 days. I love having parameters like that, you know, because it's nothing scarier than a completely blank piece of paper, whether you're writing an essay or you're trying to write a symphony. You know, blank paper is very scary. So, you know, I kind of was playing around, and I wanted something that could start, and I wanted something that could finish, that can kind of bookend it. But I was also aware that I wanted to put in, I didn't know exactly what they were, but I wanted to do certain things that would challenge people slightly, and certain aspects of things like the dynamics and the, you know, moving from this sort of, that sort of, to something slightly more complicated. So those things were just all in the mix, but basically I was really just then sitting at the harp playing for a couple of days and seeing what sort of order it came out in.
Yeah, doodling, as we say, or noodling, I think was what Susan was the name Susan gave to it last year, wasn't it? Anyway, thank you ever so much.
You're welcome.
Need to mute.
That's lovely, Karen. Thank you. That was really insightful, actually. I really, really like that.
Giving all the secrets away.
Yeah, no, it's grand. It was really grand. Does anybody else have any questions about anything? Jill does. Go for it, Jill. You need to unmute, lovely.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, Mary, I haven't managed to do all the days, so you might have explained this already. But bar 40, we've got a roll. I've just spotted it. It is 1, 2, 4 from the A, the E, and the A, isn't it?
Yes. So that,
Sorry.
I mean, actually, it's a really good question, Jill, because I did that without Karen's permission, but not with her refusal either. I just went ahead and chose that because it fitted really nicely to then do a run of 4 with the right hand. But technically, it should only have been the bottom 2 notes that would roll, and in theory, then the E would land with the A. In theory, I don't know if Karen has any issue or comment on that.
I mean, to me, it's like writing a poem or a novel or whatever. As soon as you put a piece of music out into the world, it's no longer yours to entirely control. I feel this is already quite controlled, because I don't often mark up the music quite as assiduously, you know, because I feel that players' interpretation is an important part of. When I say a performance, I mean anyone, whether it's on a concert stage or Carnegie Hall, or you're sitting playing for your neighbours, or you're sitting playing in the kitchen over Zoom as I am here just now, you know. The player has to bring, or the player should feel, I think, what they're trying to express. And it's not something that you can necessarily put into words, you know, but you should have some sort of emotional or feeling, or just how do you feel at the time. I kind of struggle now because these dynamics and everything was a snapshot of how I was playing it, you know, the last week in April before I sent it down to Mary. And honestly, I've spent a couple of hours this afternoon trying to relearn them because I might play them slightly differently in performance, or my left hand might vary slightly. And that's all absolutely fine. And I'm, you know, I would never sit on a score going, that's not the way it should be done. I mean, it was really interesting about the fingering, and I was saying this to Mary at the start. I am fascinated by fingering, and I absolutely believe that fingering on a harp is as important as bowing is to a fiddler. There's no doubt about it. And but it's also got this, now I might be saying this from ignorance because I don't play the fiddle, but to me it has these kind of extra layers and dimensions because everyone's harps are different. The tension of the string, the slight spacing of the string, how you sit at the harp, very individual. People's hands are different shapes and different sizes, but a lot of it I think stems from what your kind of background is, what you've learned and how you've learned. And to me the big differences are whether you've kind of come through, and it's not a judgment, it's just an observation, it's whether you've come through a classical style training, whether that's been, you know, from a wee girl right through conservatoire and masters and all the rest of it, or you've learned from a classical teacher who's had that sort of training, or whether, as I haven't, you know, or whether like me you've learned from traditional players. Or I've also learned quite a lot from like Paraguayan players and early music players and different things. And fingering takes on a different dimension. I always and it's interesting, I can see what Mary's doing, and when she explains it, I can see why she's doing it, but a lot of that just wouldn't have occurred to me. I did, when I was writing out, I did briefly kind of think, after I'd written, I thought, oh, you could actually take that top A with your fourth finger. I don't, I do play it the way it's written because that works better for me, and for me, I would be I think my danger point would be getting my thumb and my fourth finger mixed up and hitting against each other or something. I don't really have a problem with the crossing. I just cross four and then I bring my second under, because again, that's something that I do a lot of in tunes. So I mean, at that point I'm doing, can't even remember how the tune goes. And to me, that keeps my hand there with the 3 and the 1, and it's easier to get down to that low A. But those were my priorities for my hands and my sort of background and experience. I don't do the thumb slides because, don't tell Mary, I absolutely hate doing thumb slides. I used to, they're actually, and it's interesting because they're easier on this harp than they were on my previous, my big red gut strung harp. I don't know if this is carbon fibre strings or fluorocarbon strings to be more accurate. And I do find certain things are slightly easier on it. I used to use thumb slides an awful lot in tunes, but I found over the years I've just developed too much of a callus on that corner of my thumb that catches sometimes on a thumb slide if I've really got to depend on it. And there was a tune, it's a march that I wrote for my mum, and the second part really needs that thumb slide. And I was, you know, it's always in there, are you going to get that or not, you know? So to be honest, I reserve thumb slides for when I really, really need them, and I feel I don't particularly really need them here. But on the other hand, you should learn them, and this is at a slower pace like this is actually a great learning opportunity, because the other thing that I got when I was learning, I never did any exercises or anything until I started writing my own, because you could always get a tune that had that bit in it that you needed to practice, so you could use this as a way of practicing thumb slides. The only other thing I would say about thumb slides is, from my experience and way of playing them, the second note is always much, much heavier. And I would usually use it when the second note is like the downbeat on a reel or something. So when I do it, I tend to do it and it becomes crashingly too heavy, you know. But yeah, I mean, everything else is just, I do a little bit more. I'm kind of staring here because I did print out the fingered one and had a wee look. Left hand, I think I do more disjointed. I don't join my left hand up quite as much. I do a lot of, I don't really use my fourth finger all that much, I don't think, in the piece.
It's interesting what you said about the thumb slides there, because I wasn't going to put thumb slides in this piece until I got to line 5, and then so the fingering I'd sort of got in my head for the first 4 lines as I was learning it and thinking through weren't going to include thumb slides.
Yeah.
And then when I got to line 5 and I was trying to get my head really fully in gear with it, and it was especially bar 17, and sort of there's an offbeat left hand and then there's a left hand with, and it suddenly became comfortable for my thumbs to land at the same time, and to do that I needed to slide into it. And then I'm a big one for consistency, so having done that with that pattern of notes there, I then sort of backtracked and put them in elsewhere, for partly for the consistency of being able to play the piece and kind of, okay, if I know that it's always going to be that pattern, my hand can start doing it more automatically when it comes. And then partly for consistency of sound as well, because I do think fingering really affects the sound that you make. Like you say, the second note of a thumb slide is always more prominent. And so they never happen into an offbeat. They always happen onto a beat, albeit sometimes that beat is the second beat of the bar, which isn't a hugely strong one. Yeah, it wasn't until I got to sort of line 4 and 5 that I felt the need for the thumb slides, and then I went backwards to pop them in.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I also just I would have difficulty playing a thumb slide reliably at pianissimo as well. You know, my thumb slides are loud. They're in reels and things. So, a couple that surprised me. I'm trying to think where they were now. There was a few places where you used 2 and 4 in the bass. I found that really hard. I tried it and I thought, oh no, I'm just going to use 1 and 3.
Okay. So that for me is about the positioning of my hand on the harp overall, and where it's been and where it's going next. And I mean, as you touched on before, my background education with the harp was very sort of classical, and that's definitely impacted on the sort of where I go to naturally. So places like at the end, it happens at the end of line 5, doesn't it? So we've sort of been doing all these up here and then the octave here. So my 4 was down on that A last in that line. Then I come up here, and then the 2, 4, and then the very next notes are a 4, 2 with a 1. Sorry, Zoom does this thing now where every time I do my beautiful thumbs up, it gives you thumbs up on the screen. There you go. I like it because it's like, yeah, go me.
Remember, thumbs up. That's so funny.
So yeah, so the end of line 5 has, by doing that with the 2, 4, because I've just been up here, I haven't had to take my whole hand as low, because I like taking my hand over the strings for my positioning. So the 2, 4, and then just going straight back onto a 4, 2 and octave at a 5th puts me in the right place. And then like in the last line of that page, we have the triad, so bar 22, got the triad going up, and then I'm going to come back to that in a moment. So again, by going 2, 4, I don't have to take my whole hand as low. So again, it comes back to what's my technique style, and my technique style for me is that I always have fairly vertical thumb to the extreme, perhaps, and so I take my hand over the fingers more than anything else, which Zoom likes. And so by doing the 2, 4, I haven't had to take my hand so far, and it's ready to come back for the But then the next one I do is a 1-3 because that ties in with my thumb slide. So the 1 there and a 1 here.
Yeah.
So
It's fascinating. I must admit, I find fingering fascinating. You know, because there are so many different ways to do it, and as you've said, it's what is not just more. It's not just what's easiest for you. You've got to kind of listen or try out the different ways. Listen to what Mary's saying. Listen to what why she's doing it that way. Why I might be doing that way, and then you've got to decide where you fit in the middle of that, both in terms of natural fingers and ability, but also what sounds you want to get, and what gives you that sound might be something else again. The only thing I would ever say to people with fingering is just think about it. If you've got a marked up fingering, absolutely try it out. Think about why it's there. Think, listen or read as to what the effect is meant, that player is trying to achieve with that fingering. See if you can achieve the same, which does, this is the bit where you need to kind of veer a bit, because that might not be the most naturally easiest fingering for you. But you might find that, oh, that is the fingering that gives me that effect. Or you might find, well, no, it's not. I need to try something else. As long as you've thought it out and you can defend your fingering, then it's fine.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So Karen's original didn't have any fingering on, and that's very much why I gave you the 2 versions, and very much owning up that it was only my fingering preferences, but I am only one person. There's something you said there, Karen, and it something you said earlier on as well that made me think of it, and you've just reminded me again now, about what you want as the performer, and what you're trying to convey as the performer. And just then you were talking about what sounds you want to make, and the quality of the sound. But earlier on you were also talking about the sort of your personal meaning. And I certainly mentioned this to individuals that I teach. I don't know if I've ever said it on a recording before, but there's sort of 3 people, 3 entities involved when a piece of music's being performed. There's the original intent of the composer, which they have to kind of get down onto the page, or if they've worked with the individual, they can convey it as well. Then there's the performer who brings their own story to it, and that story might vary depending on what day of the week it is, or what they had for breakfast, or what's happening in their lives. And the Lade could be played, I could come to this from a very sort of emotional, sad place, or I could come to it from an upbeat, happy place, and the performance I give would be different, even though the notes are the same, depending on the intent that I'm putting behind it as performer, or as you put behind it when you're playing it. And then you've got your audience, the listener, whether that's the cat or whether it's Carnegie Hall. And each person, each individual in your audience has their own emotional state and place that they're listening to it from. So Karen, as composer, may have been picturing a very particular place with the Lade, because the Lade means what, Karen?
It's the mill race.
The mill race. There you
So
go.
it's the water that comes down and is used to turn the mill wheel.
There you go. So Karen might, I don't know, Karen might have had a very particular place in her mind with that. I might have different affiliations with water and put those meanings into it. And then the listener might have different ones again, or just be listening to it sort of almost oblivious of what the title was and just accepting it as in from where they are. And so what we get, every performance becomes entirely unique because of who the listeners are as much as who the performer is, even though it's coming from the same notes on a page from where the composer was. So it's I just love that sort of trio, and that it's as much about the listeners, how it ends up being,
Yeah,
and everyone's
absolutely.
experience. Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Does anybody else have any questions? I'm loving all these discussions. June, go ahead, June.
I had a question about your choice of thumb muffles. I've never seen them done at the top of the harp. And I
All right,
just
okay, I had to think what a thumb
curious
muffle
about that.
was. Sorry. Yeah, they're not. I wouldn't call them muffles. Again, you know, that might be a classical term for them. I don't know. I learned something about rubato from Maria's videos. I'll talk about that in a bit. To me, it is fairly common. Something I've done for a long time in traditional playing. I might well have been slightly influenced. I studied a lot with Paraguayan players, and they do a lot of high on the neck, and I particularly like the sound that you get when you do that. So it's not to muffle the sound, it's just to get a particular timbre. I really love playing with timbre and sounds. I'll switch that to see if we can get a better sound. I'm not sure where it is on the, like here. If I play a string, and I think Mary did talk about this in the videos, if I play a string there, you're always going to get, you know, your most sonorous, you know, beautiful sort of sound there. But the higher you go, and it's not just there or there, you can. I'm not changing the way I'm plucking. I'm simply changing my position on the string. So you can do it sometimes as like a slap bass, but that's kind of a different thing, and I would then have a rest to indicate where you wanted. That's not the sound I'm going for there. If I was doing that, I would have the same cross at the top, but I would indicate by a rest when you're stopping the sound off. So yeah, there isn't really a name for it. I think the Paraguayans call it bordaneando, but I'm not particularly aware of it. It is something that doesn't seem to be very common in the States, to be honest, because I know I've used it in my books for years, and I've had a few questions, and they've always come from American players. So is it something that's common over here, Mary, or not? Or
So I was looking in a book this morning with a student who is on here actually, and it had the same symbol but not meaning to play up there.
oh,
So
interesting. What did it
yeah,
mean?
so in that one it was play it open-handed with the thumb, but just in the middle of the
Oh, right,
middle
okay.
of the harp. So it didn't specifically mean at the top.
At the top.
And if you'll recall, I checked with you as well before I started my
You
videos.
did,
Did
that's
it
right,
mean
I
up at the
remember
top?
that, yeah.
Yeah. Because I've seen you do that, and I felt like it did mean that.
Mhm.
But yeah, I wanted to be sure. So yes, so it's not a damping at all, June. It's but it is a sort of a positional. So the cross generally does mean, yeah, play with the thumb with your open hand sort of shape, not in a damping way, but just because even doing that, playing with that different finger, like we're saying, the choice of fingering really affects how it sounds. Um, but yeah, with Karen's style, and possibly with other, I don't know if it happens in other Scottish music or not. I've seen it elsewhere played like that. I've seen other Scottish players playing involving a
It
thumb.
might be a sort of Scottish way of doing it that's kind of become that way.
Possibly has, yeah. Thank you. Anybody else have a question? Go on, Jill.
We've got one, not accidental, what do you call them? Bar 26. Grace note, sorry, just remembered. You talked about adding extra grace notes. Is there anywhere you would particularly add them, and how would that affect the fingering?
Yeah, the sad thing about grace notes on the harp is that they generally do affect the fingering. And it's one of these things, if I'm teaching workshops or students in traditional music, which is what I would generally teach, you're telling them two contradictory things, because at one point I'm telling students, you know, you want to be able to vary your grace notes. You know, well, first of all, I'm telling them that, you know, you should learn your fingering, get a really solid fingering, and you know where you are in the harp, and it helps the phrasing, and it helps the memory, and it helps you relax when you perform. All those things that we all know. But then I'm also telling them now what you don't want to do is play your grace notes in the same place all the time, and you want to be able to vary them depending on how you feel. you know, they're kind of used a bit like dynamics in that way. And of course, to do that, you have to change your fingering. The one that I've put in there, I call it a cut, and it's just a cut down, or you can cut up, but I think I've only put the one in. And it's great because it doesn't change your fingering, because it generally goes from a note, or certainly in this case, I'm going from a note that my thumb has already played, and I'm just going to play it again. And that's certainly the first thing that I would kind of think of putting in somewhere, because it's not affecting the fingering. If you were going up the wave, for example, on the, where's the bit that's going up? That, you know, I wouldn't really put, or you can cut up by doing the same thing, but just repeating the same fingering. I sat and thought, I almost didn't put the grace note in, but I find it needed something, and I didn't want another sort of chord. I've got this, where am I? That's just ringing out so beautifully down there. I'll switch the sound. That certainly, and again, this is where different harps are affecting how you play and how you might compose and things, but for me this has been quite strong. That's okay, but I just liked but what I didn't want to do was then, like when that phrase sort of comes in again, bar 29:30, I made the conscious decision not to write the grace note in, because it is good to get into the habit of playing phrases, sometimes with a grace note and sometimes without a grace note. To be honest, because I don't really have this piece in my performance repertoire yet, I don't really know where the grace notes would come, because I would generally let the grace notes just arise naturally as I become more familiar with playing the piece. So if you ask me in 6 months' time, I'll be able to tell you if I'm putting any other ones in or not. And that would also then depend on what the function of the performance was, and if I was actually wanting to play it as a composed piece of music, as a harp piece that's here to let people who maybe bought the book or whatever, or have learnt it, I would very much try and stick to what's there. If I bring it into my own performance repertoire, I will go off-piste, and probably all sorts of things might start creeping in. So yeah, I mean, it's one of the things I would like to do at some point, whenever I get some time, is to look at Baroque ornamentation in a little bit more detail and learn a bit more about that. I did some work with Trinity Guildhall years ago now. We were looking at doing traditional music grade exams in Clarkson, which we did do, and the chief examiner at that point had been a Baroque violinist. That had been his speciality. So we spent a lot of time talking about the importance of ornamentation and different ways of playing it, and that it's not always been just exactly you only play what's on the page. You would bring it to yourselves. I would have no problems with people putting in more ornamentation. I might not like it, but that would be a personal taste thing. You know, I kind of find that when people are experimenting with it, the first thing they do is they put in too much, and it's all over the place. And if it detracts from the tune, then it's not right. You know, it might be really pretty, but if there's too much of it and it's detracting from the tune, then pull back, you know. And I probably do that as well when I'm kind of working up pieces and learning pieces, because you try the ornamentation in all sorts of different places. Whether it works or not, you just have to kind of use your ear. And I'm pretty well versed in sort of a Scottish style, or a particular sort of West Highland sort of pipey Gaelic singing style that I want. So I kind of hear where the grace notes would come. But someone else, you know, might think, well, actually, I don't like them there, I like them here. It becomes a personal thing. So just experiment with it. The other thing with grace notes is, of course, exactly how do you notate them and all sorts of things. I don't normally, in my own sort of other works, of more traditional work, notate a grace note like that. I tend to do it like a little piping double-stemmed note, and it's taken me a long time to kind of understand the difference between like a classical appoggiatura and a chiacchiatura. To me, they're just cuts, you know, but it is an issue as to where the beat is landing, and is the grace note on the beat or is the beat on the melody note, and you have to think of all those things as well. And again, it depends on what you're playing and the function of why you're playing that piece at this point, and how you prefer to play it.
I love how that just ties into how geeky I was over the fingering with this. In as much as, you know, you really can go so deep into a piece, whether you're the composer producing it, whether you're the performer and you're thinking about how you're going to adapt or move it on. That, you know, and it doesn't necessarily have to come from heavy theory knowledge. It has to, you know, it comes from what sounds right, what works, from experimentation, and from really, you know, but there's I personally love, I find a great joy in really noticing and looking into really closely on those. I'm very aware of time.
What time is it? Oh gosh, I'm
I
talking too
know,
much.
no, it's all right. It's fascinating. It's really, really lovely. Could you briefly just tell us a tiny bit about your book, Karen, and then we will do our faster playthrough, our normal playthrough.
Sure. Look, I've got one too. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing, I suppose, I started working on it, and it did start from that little improvisation. And then as you get kind of halfway into a piece, I suppose I start thinking, what is this piece about? What am I doing here, you know? And I was kind of aware of the rhythms of the piece, and this particular place is kind of one place, the Lade, but it's also there's a couple of places that I've got in mind. I grew up in a place called Coburnie in Ayrshire, and these are all places from Coburnie. Our football team, for example, was Lade side, Coburnie Lade side, because the pitch was at the side of the Lade, you know. The loch, there's obviously Coburnie Loch is there, and that's a place you would go and walk and all the rest of it. The burn, which is the picture that I took there, I crossed over the little bridge every day to go to primary school. The Lee isn't one particular place with that name, but there was a particular place we used to walk up by the side of the burn, and there was a sort of nice, flat, grassy sort of field, I suppose, and I just very much felt that was like the sun coming through at the end and everything as well. So having written the first piece, I kind of decided, because I was so much enjoying just the excuse just to sit and do nothing else but experiment with things on my new harp. The other thing which came into the writing of the pieces as well, and I don't know how many people knew this or not, but I broke my wrist. I broke my left wrist in early February. So it was also kind of rehab for myself doing stuff. So it did kind of at times, it was in my mind, you know, as I was kind of writing on it. So I decided that it would be these 4 pieces. They are all sort of connected. They can be played as a suite. They kind of take, I think, they take you through the different places and the sort of the different emotions. The second one, the Loch, for example, I'm not going to play the whole thing because I can't at the minute, but it's much more of a sort of starting off like that, but then it goes a bit darker and it goes a bit rhythmic. And I was kind of thinking of, you know, because I've walked in that, I've got memories of it with beautiful blue sky and sort of really, really deep blue sort of colour on the loch. But it's also, for me as well, the whole area is tied up with memories of the steelworks, because Glengarnock Steelworks was a big part of the town, and they were right on the loch. So the loch was, you know, it was used industrially, and you can walk right down to it now all the way around, but you couldn't before because of the works. And there's also, you know, there's becomes personal memories tied in there as well. I mean, the day I took this picture, I'd been at a funeral, and I'd gone to put some flowers in the loch, you know, from a funeral of a good friend the previous week who was also from Coburnie. So there's darker passages and things. The burn is more playful. goes into F, but you've got a bit of time. It goes into G. Sorry, you've got time to put your Fs on. And I wanted a change, and I was kind of thinking of the burn because the titles came to me once I got the Lade. I thought, oh, the Lade, oh, the Loch, the Burn, the Lee. That's just works beautifully. And I just like this going into that sort of feel, and it goes into more of a sort of jig as well. Which is all the days that I used to donner along over the bridge on my way to school, to primary school. And of course, we all played poo sticks on the bridge where you drop them on one side and run to the other side. And it was where we played, you know. I always find it quite hard to decide how to sort of end a suite of music. I think is harder than anything else. I wanted to kind of bookend a little bit with the way, you know, we've opened with the, but I didn't want it to be exactly the same. So there's sort of similarities, but it's a slightly different pattern. Can't even remember it. It kind of goes like that. So there's similarities there, but there's childhood memories of the sun coming through the trees and sort of summer, but it's quite church-like. My husband, who's got a good way with words and has got a good ear for music, he said, yeah, it's like a sort of a pastoral hymn at time almost. It sort of swells up and then sort of comes back. So I was just having great fun playing with my harp, really, to be entirely honest. And I knew certain things. I wanted them that could work as standalone pieces, but if you want two of them to run together, or three or four, if you want a longer piece, you can flow from start to finish. You can introduce each one. You can do what you like, really. So
They sound
yeah, I don't know what else to
beautiful.
say. I never know what to say about it, but it's very new. It came from the printers on Tuesday, so it was very exciting.
That is fantastic, and it's available for about £10, I believe.
Yeah, it's £10 on my website, and you can either get the book, or obviously there's postage in the book, or you can get a PDF. On my website as well. And I've just learned how to reformat, so you can actually get the PDF in either A4 or US letter size for people in the States.
That's brilliant, fantastic.
So,
I love how much personal story there is in there as well. I really like that. I have been lucky enough to play them already, but I will now play them with a bit of your story in mind, which is really nice, really lovely. Would you be so kind as to play for us and for us to join in as we wish the
absolutely.
lead
I'll
at
do
a
my
speed
best.
you like, and
Okay.
we'll join in the best we can. I will mute myself and leave you there.
Let me sort these levers back down. Right. Let's see if I can, first of all.
That's it. Yeah, and if you'd be willing to count us in and we'll all play with you, that'd be lovely.
All right, okay. So I'm going to do, let me think what I'm going to play. 1, 2, 3, 4.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you very
One
much.
thing I was trying not to think as I was going through that, but one fingering thing that I thought might be useful, and it's kind of, these are the sort of things that I would go back and tidy up my fingering wise, you know, once you get into it. But I do with these, the G, and that's, I probably faltered a little bit at this point when I suddenly thought, because I realised what I do, and it's one of these funny techniques that Mary says I introduced everyone to. To me, at the end, where you've gone, where are we? Sort of like bar 41, 42, 43. There's too much ringing there for my ears, and I really want the focus to be on the A's at the end. So I'm going to do something like. So I would play that with what I call a short plat. So I'm damping out the G with my fourth finger as I play the A. That one's quite finicky, but where the same idea happens at the end, I do the short plat with my right hand to get rid of the G, but the G in the bass is still ringing, and I want to get rid of that G at that point where you've done. I would touch the G with my second finger and play to damp it, and play the A with my thumb, just to give that a little bit more clarity. I want the G's gone, and I just want to hear the A's, you know, the A, kind of the A and the E, A minor sound. But that's important to me because it clashes in my ear, and it might not be something that you've thought of. So it's just, remember that, and this happens with any piece of music, learning the fingering and learning the piece and being able to kind of, for me, I want to be able to play it by memory, and I feel insecure while I still have the music in front of me. That's the start of learning to play it and learning how you want to play it. And it's then that all the kind of icing and, you know, the frosting, the sprinkles on the cake in terms of ornamentation and dynamics and sort of this rubato thing, like pulling time about, and are there bits you want to pause at? Are there bits, sounds, do you want to change your timbre or your sound at any point? So that's when it gets exciting for me, you know, once you've done all the hard work, you've done the memorizing and the fingers, and you've learned how to actually do it, then you can start deciding and learning how you want to play it yourself. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. This has been a really fascinating hour and a bit.
It's been very enjoyable. Thank you all.
Yeah, no, discussing it through. Yes, thank you, June. Anybody else have any final comments? Not that we have time for deep deep questions now, but any final comments from anybody? Or go on, Jill.
It's just to thank both Mary and Karen enormously for giving us such a rich JuNEWary challenge. First time it's been done. And I mean, tonight's Zoom, it's been so insightful how a composer works. And the teaching this time has just been terrific, Mary. Thank you, both of you, very much indeed.
Oh, no,
Very welcome.
On behalf of Harps Northwest. And I'm sure there'll be lots and lots of people all over the world who will really enjoy this video tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. There will be a survey sent out in the next day or two to get people's feedback. You know, we're always shaping and the challenge, and from my point of view as the tutor on it, it's been wonderful to sort of separate it out into 2 months this year. That's really been a brilliant development for me, but obviously I'm interested to know how that's been for you guys too. But yeah, it's been a beautiful piece to sort of fully immerse into in these sort of summer, well, it's trying to be summer months. I don't know if you've been on our website. Obviously there's different ways of accessing this, but if you've been on our website, and there's a little I'm just going to bring it up for me to look at and remind myself what I actually put. the little quote I put on there, it's by Jean-Paul Sartre. To read a poem in January is as lovely as to go for a walk in June. And whilst we're in June, not the January bit now, I liked the link between the January and the June, and the idea that this music has been like going for our walk as much as the music that we did in January might have been like reading a poem, and the pleasure and the joy from the different times of year. It's really lovely. And you know, taking in music at different times in the year is really lovely. So thank you so much, everybody, for attending. And thank you so much, Karen, for the beautiful piece and the beautiful music and sharing all your lovely thoughts tonight too. And I will allow everybody to leave. I will stop the recording now, so you can all be relaxed. And then you can all leave as you wish. It'd be lovely.